This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Kicking off today's show is Dennis McKinney, Kansas Farm Service Agency State Director, with a reminder on upcoming deadlines for programs from FSA. K-State veterinary entomologist Cassandra Olds continues the show as she says what ticks are often found in Kansas, the concerns they may carry, and why proper removal is important. The show wraps up with K-State's Brad White, Phillip Lancaster, and Brian Lubbers with another segment from the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast, discussing summer grazing plans and their relation to the beef industry's sustainability. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Wednesday show with an update from the Kansas Farm Service Agency. And then to give it to us this week, we're joined by the State Director of the Kansas FSA, Dennis McKinney. Dennis, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me today.
Dennis, first wanting to touch on the acreage reporting, and that deadline is coming up.
Yeah, July 15th is the acreage reporting deadline. So as soon as you get everything planted, go in, get it reported. If you make some changes after July 15th, you can come back then, but just be sure you have the bulk of your work reported by July 15th. But don't wait. Don't do like me and sometimes procrastinate and then have to catch up on that. Just, like in Kiowa County, I just do whatever those ladies tell me to do. I suggest the same thing for you. Don't wait, and remember that deadline is there, and you want to get everything reported.
And reporting all those row crops that got planted?
Right, reporting all your spring-seeded crops, whether it's oats, corn, milo, grain sorghum, whatever. If you double crop something after July 15th, you can come back and report that later. So don't wait. Just go ahead and get whatever you have and get that reported.
And thinking of things through the Kansas Farm Service Agency, also wanting to mention continuous CRP, and that sign-up is still taking place?
That's right. Continuous CRP, of course, is a continuous sign-up. Those contracts typically run 15 years instead of 10 years. They have a little higher payment rate. They have a few more restrictions on haying and grazing. But those practices, like filter strips, buffer strips, a lesser prey chicken, those different continuous sign-up practices are still going on. The National Office takes those in batches. So about every 2 months, they'll take what's been signed up in the previous 2 months in that batch and evaluate that. So the next batch date is June 7th. So if you want something to be considered as quickly as possible, have that in by June 7th. And the next one after that is July 12th. So be sure to keep an eye on that. Right now, we're approaching the national limit of 27 million acres is being approached. So the grassland CRP sign-up that we'd expected is on hold for a while. The migratory waterfowl safe CRP sign-up we'd expected is on hold for a little while. We'd still hope to get those in this year. But I think they're watching that limit. We were on fairly level, kind of a slowly declining number of acres in CRP, but grassland CRP has been so popular that our acres have shot up, and we're approaching that national statutory limit. So I think that's why they're being very careful now on announcing any new signups. But the continuous signup is still going on.
How might someone distinguish if they think their field is something that'd be good for CRP?
First of all, visit the county service center, talk to them, talk to the FSA folks, and the NRCS folks can help out as well in evaluating that field to see what, if you think it's a good candidate for CRP, and they can also help brief you on all the different CRP practices that are available out there. Some have lower payment rates, some have higher rates, but they have a few more restrictions or a few more requirements as far as number of species required. The migratory waterfowl safe CRP, we had a crew out in Finney Lane County received national awards for their work on that because they had signed up so many acres. But it focuses on playa restoration. It improves habitat not just for waterfowl, but also for lesser prey chicken and upland game in general, as well as increases our recharge rates. While we're talking about national awards, also mentioned up in Washington County, we had Donna Griswold, and in Atchison County, Ashley Barnhart, who received national awards for their work nationwide on the farm loan program as well. So we're very proud of those people.
Sounds like some great work from the Kansas Farm Service Agency. And something else we are wanting to mention from the Farm Service Agency, the Emergency Livestock Assistance Program.
If you remember a while back, we announced a retroactive extension of Emergency Livestock Assistance Program back to fall of 2021 for those who were caught in wildfires. We had cases out there where people who had ran a reduced stocking rate for their cows, left forage standing to graze in the winter, which is a very smart practice, smart management practice. Some people consider it very climate smart. Our program didn't cover that. National Office reevaluated that. They said we will cover that going back in those 2021 period. It covers losses from wildfires from October 16th through the December 31st of 2021. The bulk of that's going to be in the 4-county fire area there in north central Kansas. The deadline to sign up for that is June 7th. So just a reminder, if you had that deadline is June 7th for that ELAP extension for fire losses in the last part of 2021.
There are many things that can create difficult times for Kansas producers, and another one of those is the drought. And there are places with the drought monitor where specific levels have already been reached that trigger FSA programs.
Right now, if you look at it, there's just a small red area of D3 that's out there where Hodgman, Ness, Rush, and Pawnee counties all come together. We have quite a bit large area of western and south central Kansas that are still in a D2 drought conditions. Hopefully we'll get more rain. We'd sure like to stay out of that. But 8 weeks in a D2 or any time at all in a D3 will trigger the Livestock Forage Program and the Emergency Livestock Assistance Program. So we're keeping an eye on that, and hope producers will as well.
And how do those programs help those producers then?
Livestock Forage Program helps to compensate for grass that was lost due to drought. And the main goal there is to help producers keep their herds together. We've seen a sizable increase in beef prices because of the cow herd's decline. That cow herd liquidation would have been much greater had it not been for our FSA programs to help producers keep those cow herds together, which means it's not only good for producers, it's also very good for consumers as well, that we stabilize those supplies.
And on the topic of programs from the Farm Service Agency, the Farm Loan Program and Farm Storage Program.
The Farm Loan Program is, we're taking a lot of loan applications right now, particularly in areas that have been in drought for an extended period of time. We're getting a lot of applications, not just for buying new land, but really for restructuring and reorganizing on debt. You can really tell where those applications are coming, where people have lost a couple years' crops in a row. Farm Loan Program, the interest rates right now run from 3.5% to 5.25%. We're developing an online application process. I know a lot of our younger producers that are good with technology will like that. But we have programs out there for buying land to help new producers get started, to help producers that are struggling restructure. So if you think you might be interested, again, visit with one of our service centers. They can link you up with the right farm loan folks and help you get the help you need. We also have our Farm Storage Facility Loan Program, which doesn't have any income restrictions. It's eligible statewide. The rates run from 4.375 up to 4.6%. Terms range from 3 to 12 years, and it's not just for grain storage facilities. That can help you with construction of hay storage facilities or the equipment needed to handle the grain or handle the hay. So it's a flexible program. The usage is down quite a bit. Again, if you've been in a couple of years of drought, people really aren't interested in building storage facilities. But it's there. A number of producers found it worthwhile. Visit our county service center. They'll direct you. We have 4 locations in the state that handle farm storage facility loans. They'll get you linked up and can help you utilize that program.
Dennis, any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
We do a lot in the Farm Service Agency to help producers, mitigate risk. We do. And again, as I've said before, we shouldn't remove all risk because then our capitalist markets won't work like they should. But in agriculture, we face a huge amount of risk from both weather, as we've seen, and from markets, volatile markets. We know we need to maintain a safe and resilient food supply. We certainly learned that during COVID. So that's what we aim to do. And in our job, we are privileged to work with the world's best farmers and ranchers in an effort to improve the environment and help create the safest, most abundant food supply in the world. And we're proud of that mission.
That was the State Director of the Kansas Farm Service Agency, Dennis McKinney. As always, you can find out more information about FSA programs at Farmers.gov. I will link that in today's show notes on agtoday.net. Before we cut to a break, we're going to be joined by USDA's Rod Bain and Undersecretary for Trade and Foreign Agricultural Affairs, Alexis Taylor, as they talk about the approaching deadline for interested participants to join a delegation for USDA's September agricultural trade mission to Vietnam.
June 4th is the deadline for interested agribusinesses, domestic farm and food exporters, and state ag departments to apply to participate in a September USDA-led agricultural trade mission.
Last year in 2023, the United States exported $3.1 billion of agricultural products to Vietnam, and really across a diverse set of categories.
And Undersecretary for Trade and Foreign Agricultural Affairs Alexis Taylor says there will be opportunity for delegation members to build upon these sales opportunities during the September 9th through 13th Ag Trade Mission.
We will bring in buyers from Burma or Myanmar, Cambodia, and Thailand. So we're not only tapping into the Vietnamese market, but really expanding our reach regionally as well for those businesses that join us.
While there are plenty of U.S.-based products that are popular with Vietnamese consumers,
products like cotton, dairy, dried distillers grains for animal feed, fresh fruit, poultry, soybeans, and tree nuts really were some of the leading categories.
The upcoming Ag Trade Mission also provides opportunities for new or increased market access for other products.
I think there are increasingly some exciting opportunities as we also work on the market access side of the equation for our specialty crop producers. We're also working on a priority of opening up the Vietnamese market to U.S. stone fruit, so things like peaches and nectarines.
Also taking place during visits in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, senior-level official meetings between the Undersecretary and Vietnamese counterparts.
Whenever I'm in another country, I always meet with government counterparts and work on trade policy issues, amplify maybe challenges or new opportunities that we have bilaterally in that market. But the real focus is for those businesses as we set up those business-to-business meetings. I think we will see a really great delegation from the United States, from the food and ag sector, and we're excited and working hard to set up really qualified, reliable partners for them to meet with on the importer side.
More information about USDA Ag Trade Missions and the Vietnam ATM, as well as applications for that specific mission, are available at this web address, www.fas.usda.gov/topics/trade-missions. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our Wednesday show talking about ticks with K-State veterinary entomologist Cassandra Olds. Cassandra, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks. Always excited to talk about ticks.
Cassandra, can you tell us what is the life cycle of a tick?
So ticks are really cool. We only think of them in terms of when they're on us, but actually they spend most of their time off us. So ticks hatch out from an egg into a six-legged larva, and that's what people normally call seed ticks. So people use this word seed ticks, but it's actually any larva stage from any tick species. You can't, unless you have a microscope, you can't distinguish who's who. So they have these little six-leg larvae. They'll find a meal, take a bit of a blood meal. They'll fall off and molt into the next stage, which is called a nymph, and those have 8 legs. And then the nymph will take another blood meal, molt into an adult, and this is when you start seeing adult males and adult females. Now, you can spend all these 3 stages on one host, or you can spend it on 2 hosts, or you can spend it on 3 different hosts. And it really depends on the tick species as to if it picks 1 host, or 2 hosts, or 3 hosts. And then also what its preferences are for each individual stage, what it wants to be on.
What are some common tick species in Kansas, and are there some of them that carry a few concerns with them as well?
Yeah, so when we're talking about human health, we've got 3 that are our primary concern. There's lots of other tick species, but the 3 that we really care about. So that is the Lone Star tick, which is Amblyomma americanum, and that is basically over the eastern half of the state. As we move westwards and it gets drier, it's not as hospitable. And it transmits a number of different pathogens. We've got ehrlichiosis. It transmits some viruses that are pretty nasty. And it's of most concern, what most people know it for is this is the tick that causes the red meat allergy or alpha-gal syndrome. And this is a fairly aggressive tick. So most ticks will just hang out and wait for a host to find it. But a amblyomma tick will actually go out hunting for a host. So they're very aggressive and they will quite happily feed on humans. So a lot of other tick species, they might be more selective and they really want to be on a dog. But if you happen to be around and it's getting towards the end of its life stage and it's really hungry, okay, fine, I'll settle for a human. But with the Lone Star tick, they're quite happy to be on people. The second most prevalent tick that people generally encounter is the American dog tick. And this is Dermacentor variabilis. And it is a big vector for a number of different pathogens, but in terms of human health, mainly we worry about it for anaplasmosis, but also Rocky Mountain spotted fever, rickettsiosis. And the prevalence in Kansas is quite high. And so people normally know this as a fever where you get lots of spots, but you don't always get the spots. So just because you don't break out in spots doesn't mean you don't have it. And then the third one, very limited distribution over the state. We don't get a lot of them. It's just basically a tiny sliver in the east, on the eastern side of the state is the deer tick, the black-legged deer tick, which is the Ixodes scapularis, and that is a vector of Lyme disease, which is a big problem. But I would say dog tick and the Lone Star tick are our two primary concerns. And the problem with these pathogens is they all present the same way. You tend to have headaches, fever, nausea. Sometimes you might get the spotted rash forming, but not always if you've got the spotted fever group. And so it's kind of nondescript symptoms that might also be the flu or might also be something else. And so sometimes people don't realize that they actually have picked up a tick-borne infection. Although I would say most people who get bitten by ticks are actually quite fine. It takes a long time for, the transmission event to occur. So if you can get the tick off immediately, if it hasn't bitten you, no risk. If it's just started to bite you and you get it off within the first couple of hours, very, very minimal risk. It's only once we start getting into day 2, day 3, when ticks are actively feeding, that your risk for transmission of pathogens, if it has a pathogen, will be higher. And not all ticks in the environment are infected with pathogens.
Cassandra, what does that Lone Star tick look like?
The adult female has that very distinctive little white spot on the back of her scutum. This is just the adult female. So people can get bitten by the male version of this tick, who's a nondescript brown tick. For us who work with ticks a lot, we can differentiate between them. But if I say a long mouthpart or a short mouthpart, most people don't really know what that would be. But it's a generally brownish colored tick, and it's got almost like a goldish tint. There's a few lines at the bottom, on the part that's opposite the mouth part. There's a few tiny little goldish lines in there, and that's the male form of the adult stage. But you can type it into Google, right? If you type into Google, you'll get lots of pictures. And even if you get a tick off you and you want to identify it, often what you can do is just type in ticks in Kansas and then look at some pictures and see who you get the closest to.
How do these ticks often end up on people?
So it's not the tick's fault, public service announcements. The ticks aren't actively trying to find us and cause misery, but they are in nature. They're in nature, so normally when people are out and about, especially in tall grass, they will find themselves collecting ticks. So what happens is, and it's really cool, so ticks have special little organs on their first pair of legs. They're called Haller's organs. And what those do is they can detect smell and carbon dioxide. So a tick will crawl up the grass blade and hold on to it and then wave his little front legs around. And what he's doing is he's waiting and waiting for the smell. When he feels the smell and certain vibrations, then he knows a host is there, and then he will actually, when the host walks past and brushes against that grass, he'll let go of the grass and jump on. There is some evidence that they're light enough that static electricity can make them kind of launch off the grass, so they can travel a very short distance through the static electricity that we have in our bodies. But that's a very short distance. So for the most part, it's when you're walking in grassy areas that you're picking it up.
How can people protect themselves outside?
So the biggest thing is going to be, and I know this is hard when it's hot outside, but long pants, putting your pants into your socks, tucking in your shirt, long sleeves, any way that you can reduce the surface area of your skin exposure. So protective clothing is really important. There's a lot of products out there, tick repellents, DEET repellents that work pretty well. There are things like you'll see them sometimes in the pet section, ultrasonic tick repellents. They're very expensive. They're useless. Their ticks don't recognize ultrasonic sound, and they definitely don't care about it enough to not jump on you. So don't waste your money on these ultrasonic repellents. Most important thing is when you come back inside, check yourself. check especially in crevices and folds of skin where skin is thinner. They like to be around the waistline, on your back. Just get a buddy to make sure that you don't have any ticks and check in all the folds and crevices.
And wanting to make sure people are getting these ticks off of them if they have them.
Yeah.
And what's the best way to do that?
So this is the part that freaks people out the most. And really, there is no reason. I would rather be bitten by a tick than be dealing with a fly, because a tick doesn't move very fast, right? It can only go so fast. Once it's on you, it's not going to move too quickly. You are completely safe handling ticks. They are not, just handling them is not going to cause anything. They also aren't going to bite very quickly. The way their mouth parts are, they actually have to go through and saw through the skin, so they can't just bite you if you're handling them. It takes a long time for them to actually get their mouth parts in. So you're perfectly safe to handle them. What you want to do is get as close to the base of your skin, so using your thumb and your forefinger, get as close to your skin, gentle but firm pressure, so you don't want to be squeezing it so it, gets mad and regurgitates into you. Gentle but firm pressure, pulling away from the skin. Do not burn it. They can feel. So if you do anything that agitates it, their reaction is actually going to be to possibly regurgitate the blood meal that they're busy taking in, which means you've got a higher risk of getting pathogens if they carry it. There's all sorts of secondary bacterial infections that can occur. You don't want to molest the tick. You don't want to be burning him. You don't want to be knocking it about. You just want to get it off calmly, slowly, gently. I also don't advise smothering it in Vaseline. Even though people do this because then they don't have to touch it and it will eventually dislodge, you want to get it off as soon as possible. So just grab it. If you're squeamish, grab a pair of forceps, but then you've got a high chance of slipping and making it mad. So just touch it with your fingers. We all deal with gross things all the time. Ticks aren't that bad. Grab them, pull them, and be done. I do always suggest that you just freeze them in the freezer for 2 weeks. Just in case, if you start getting flu-like symptoms in the next 2 weeks, then you have the tick, which means that if it's something unknown, it can always be tested for. We can also say, okay, which tick is it? So then that's a differential diagnosis, because we can say which tick what pathogens it would transmit naturally. If after a couple of weeks you feel completely fine, just throw it in the trash.
Cassandra, if people are just wanting to find more information about ticks, what do you recommend they do?
University extension websites are usually pretty good about the information that they have. Unfortunately, if you just Google things, you get a lot of misleading information. For example, the fact that ticks will fly out of trees. Ticks aren't flying out of trees. Ticks don't climb up trees. There's no good reason for a tick to climb up a tree. But if you're under a tree, which happens to have tall grass, then you get a tick on you. So ticks don't fly out of things, definitely not out of trees. So you get a lot of weird information. You'll also get misnomers about how to remove ticks and things like that. So always stick with trusted sources. CDC has a great website that has all the different ticks across the United States. It also has all the pathogens. CDC is a great resource for what it looks like, where it's found, what it transmits. So I always steer people towards the CDC's website, and you can just type that into Google.
Cassandra, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and share with us some information about ticks.
You're most welcome.
That was K-State veterinary entomologist Cassandra Olds. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but we'll be right back.
You're tuned into Agriculture Today. I'm Jacob Cloughton for Shelby Varner, and we end today's show with Brad White, Phillip Lancaster, and Brian Lubbers from the Beef Cattle Institute.
Grazing has been one of the big things that the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, in fact, I think 3 out of the 5 key metrics for the cow-calf side are related to having a grazing plan. But I want to find out more in general. I know you went to the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, which is an organization that has been around for several years and has really done some good stuff. What did you learn at their most recent meeting, Phillip?
Lots of different stuff. It was a good meeting. The Roundtable is at the point where they have been, over the last several years, they have put together their metrics, their key indicators. How are we going to define sustainability? And in the last couple of years, they've set goals for how are we going to monitor continuous improvement in the sustainability of beef production. And so 3 of those indicators for the cow-calf sector, one of those metrics is a grazing management plan. At this latest meeting, in the last year, the roundtable has put together a template to help producers develop a grazing management plan. You can find that on their website. But it goes through all the different things that you need to think about as part of the grazing management plan and gives you kind of an outline of developing and writing down how you're going to handle different situations, setting goals, those types of things. And then one of the other interesting things that was done and was presented at the meeting was that the roundtable has completed a survey of producers of how many producers currently have a grazing management plan and how many don't. What percentage of them have a written plan that they can go back and evaluate periodically and check and adapt to better fit their operation and their goals.
I bet it's way less that have a written plan.
Yes, yeah. I don't remember exactly how they defined a grazing management plan in their survey. I don't think they really presented that. So this was the presentation that they presented these results in, is what I'm trying to remember. There should be a white paper that comes out with the full results in the next few weeks, I think, is what they said. So we should be able to find that on the roundtable page.
Maybe how you define a grazing management plan was just probably not presented well. But some people may have a pasture, but they probably still have some mental idea of this is when we're going to turn them out, and this is ideally when we're going to take them off pasture, right? And that technically is a mental. I mean, that's a grazing management plan. It's not a lot of options, but yeah.
Well, some of the smaller producers too. I mean, I grew up. We were small. Those cattle stay on that pasture all year round.
It's the same pasture.
It's the same pasture. When the grass starts to green up in the spring, they stop eating hay bales and they start grazing. And in the fall, when it dries up, they stop eating grass and start eating hay bales. I mean,
I like the idea of being able to set goals, and I fully get, because I'm the same way. I can see the value of writing it down. But it's challenging to get done in and amongst everything else. And sometimes we err too far to just like when you start some new exercise program or something and then you overdo it the first day, right? That's what happens with grazing management is you go, okay, I'm going to write down absolutely everything, when I put them in, how many I put, how many animal units, how tall was the forage, and I'm going to take a picture. And then by next week, I've moved on, right? Just like the exercise management program.
Like we've done with record keeping. We think, well, we keep track of this, and this, and then we get it just becomes too much, too cumbersome.
So you're saying start simple,
start simple, and pick the things that are going to give you the highest value to keep track of or to do, and start with just those. And then if you see value in adding different things, then you can branch out.
To what Brian said, if I have a pasture turnout and a date I start feeding, if I track that, then I will be able to calculate my number of days grazing. And I can have a very simple goal of I'm going to increase my grazing days year after year.
That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.